Sam Darnold will be looking to rebound from his worst game of the season against the Rams just 5 weeks ago, while the Rams are going to be looking to solve Seattle's stifling defense in a pivotal rematch. Thursday Night Football. You're listening to Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12s and Rams fans. You're listening to the latest Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm host Corbin Smith for the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams, and we have got arguably the biggest Thursday night game that has happened since we added Thursday night games. The first time that Amazon is going to have two 11-plus win teams facing off in the same game. NFC West and number one seed in the NFC up for grabs. The Seahawks and Rams duke it out. We're going to be diving into the key storylines, the matchups to watch in this rematch, predictions, keys to victory. We've got it all coming your way here, courtesy of our friends over at Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Travis, this is the first time you and I have gotten to kick it this year. Our buddy Doug was on for the last one, but we get this massive matchup on Thursday Night Football. And as I just mentioned, I've looked back at the records. This is the best Thursday night game that there has been in terms of records ever since they added the Thursday game. Two 11-plus win teams, in this case 11-3, Seattle 11-3, Los Angeles, and you got first place in the NFC West as well as the number one seed and the coveted bye in the NFC. All of that is up for grabs going into this game. I don't know that you could make it any bigger this time of year than what this game is going to be tonight.
Yeah, it's huge, Corbin, for all the reasons that you said, and it's. This felt like this could be important the last time that these two teams played back at SoFi Stadium. I've been saying it ever since, both here on Locked On Rams and on my radio show in Los Angeles, was the Seahawks are the best team that I've seen all season. I really don't think it's close. I think they're the one team that when they matched up against the Rams that you looked at and said, yeah, if they played 10 times, I think they go 5-5. I think that they're incredibly equally matched. I'm incredibly excited to see it. You knew that this was going to be important for the division back then. I don't know if I thought that this would be for the inside track to that number one seed, seeing Philadelphia fall off. The NFC South is completely cratered. The North has kind of all come together. The Bears are kind of still sitting there, but the NFC is going to have a number one seed out of the West. Likely it might be one of these two teams. It could still be the 49ers if things break their way over the course of the last 3 games of the season. So it's, like you said, it's as big as it gets. It's prime time. Matthew Stafford's trying to make an MVP run. A prime time standalone game is a great opportunity to do that. So there's a lot on the line on Thursday.
When you look back at that first game that these two teams played, Jason Myers, if he would have just had his Wheaties that morning, we could be having a different discussion right now about Seattle putting this division away because they'd be trying to get a sweep here. And it's crazy that was how the game ended, considering how poorly Sam Darnold played. I mean, Sam Darnold's been fantastic 95% of this season. He's had a couple games recently where he has not had as much help and the offense has not been quite as effective, but he's still got 22 touchdown passes, over 3,300 passing yards. He's only got 2 turnovers in the last 4 games. He's really done a nice job since that 4-interception performance of taking care of the football. And I know that there's kind of a narrative out there right now that, but the trade-off is they're not getting the explosive plays. Again, I don't think that it's been that he's not looking for them. I think that they've ran into some buzzsaws. And I got to give the Colts credit with the way that they played on Sunday. A lot of people are saying, wow, you guys almost lost to Phillip Rivers. But it's like, the Colts still only scored 16 points in that game. It's not like they were lighting it up offensively. But Indianapolis, their defense was flying all over the place. They were making plays. But everybody's going to have eyes on Sam Darnold because this has been the one team he has not been able to figure out. I mean, even early this year, he put up 27 points on the Houston Texans. It's not like he has played poorly against other really good defenses. It has been Chris Shula who has been his kryptonite to this point. And even with that, with the 4 picks, Darnold led him on several really nice drives at the end of the game, and he's just kind of got that short-term memory, and we'll see what he's able to do in this primetime game Thursday Night Football playing at Lumen. But he's going to have his full array of players, except we don't know if Charles Cross is going to be protecting him. That is a huge injury for Seattle going into this game. But this is a Seahawks team that very much needs Sam Darnold to protect the football, but they also have to let him do his thing. They can't let him be, hamstrung where he's not throwing the ball around, because you got to play into his strengths. They've just got to allow him to be able to have more opportunities where receivers are getting open, change his launching point a few more times, play some of the things into what works well for him. And I know the Rams are going to do everything they can to make it that Clint Kubiak can't do that and get a lot of 3rd and longs like they did the first time.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned him having a short memory from what happened last time. I think we're both looking at exactly the same things from different sides, that this is not just that what they did to him at SoFi Stadium where they forced him into 4 interceptions. This is 3 times in a row that they've absolutely terrorized him. That you go back to last season in Minnesota on a Thursday night, actually, they sacked him 7 times and they broke him. Then he came back to the playoff game in the wild card round, which was actually played in Arizona because of the fires we had here in Los Angeles. They sacked him 9 times. That was the one famously where the Minnesota Vikings play-by-play guy screams, just get rid of the ball already. He held onto the ball too long. So we've gone from a 7-sack game to a 9-sack game to a 4-interception game. They have tied him in knots. Now, if they can do it again, I think the Rams have a really good chance. But to your point, the 4-interception game that came at SoFi Stadium, that's the 4 interceptions. You should lose by 3 touchdowns. They lost by 2 points and had a chance to win the game at the end. That is a very, very sobering fact, I think, for the Rams, is that even though they turned him over as often as they did, the Rams did not have a ton of success offensively against that Seattle defense. The Seahawks still had a chance to kick a field goal at the end. They missed it, thankfully, for Rams fans. But I think this game turns on Sam Darnold. If he's just okay, I think Seattle's in a really good spot. If he's good, I don't know what happens. This could be a really weird game. But if the Rams can do what they've done to him 3 consecutive times, because I always have a thing that, right, one time can happen to anybody. It's pro sports. You can have a bad day. Other guy can have a good day. No big deal. 2 times, it's like, that's kind of interesting. 3 times in a row is a pattern. 3 times in a row is, I know how to make you uncomfortable. I know how to put you in spots that you don't want to be in. So hopefully the pattern continues for Rams fans.
And I hate to, this might still be kind of a fresh wound for Seahawks fans, even though Russell Wilson's now played for like 5 teams since they traded him. But Green Bay was the team that he just, for whatever, even when they won the NFC title game in 2014, he had 5 interceptions in that game.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes there are just certain play callers and certain teams that really bother people. And Darnold's played really well against San Francisco. He's played really well against Arizona. I mean, most of the other teams he's played really well against. It's just been the Rams. So the question really is going to be, can he solve what Chris Shula is throwing at him? Because he just seems like he gets confused by what they're doing defensively. Is he going to be able to? Sometimes the short week actually can play into that a little bit, because you don't have as much time to, soak up everything that's happened in the last 3 games, and you just go and play football. So we'll see what ends up happening on that front. But the Rams maybe not so excited about this. Julian Love and Jaron Reed are going to be in the lineup this time. They were not the last time these 2 teams played, and Seattle still held Matthew Stafford under 150 passing yards in that game. And Davante Adams, not looking good for him to play this week. So that's certainly a massive storyline for the Rams coming into this game. Charles Cross for Seattle, Davante Adams for the Rams. Both these teams in a short week, some key pieces on offense that probably won't be out there in this game.
Yeah, I would be, I don't even want to say surprised, shocked, flabbergasted, knocked me over with a fit. Davante Adams, if is not going to play barring a miracle, right? We all saw what happened against Detroit, where he was running, and anybody that's watched football or any sport, when you see a guy pull up like that, you know exactly what it is. He'd been dealing with a hamstring for a couple of weeks. He missed a couple of days of practice going into that Detroit game. So when that went down the way it did, I think everybody knew what it is. The good news for Rams fans is that with the win against Detroit on Sunday, they clinched a playoff spot. So no matter what happens over these last 3 weeks, the Rams are going to the playoffs. So even if Davante Adams doesn't play on Thursday and they lose, doesn't play on Monday Night Football against the Falcons and they lose, and doesn't play in the final week of the season against Arizona and they lose, they're still in, and he will have a month off of his feet, at least potentially, to try to get that hamstring back to his best, best place possible going into the playoffs. So you have your full complement of weapons. The Rams would love to win on Thursday. The Rams would love to finish this thing off and be the number 1 seed in the NFC, but they do have the luxury of a guaranteed playoff spot to get who I think is their most explosive player, their most dangerous weapon back on the field by the time we get into January football. That being said, you don't want to go on the road a bunch of times, and especially when you look at where they would likely have to go, whether that's back to Seattle, Green Bay, Chicago, Philadelphia, San Francisco. These are the places that, you're most likely to end up. And the Rams, obviously, California, Southern California, warm. Those are all cold, wet, difficult places to play. They do have a little bit of an off-ramp to be as healthy as they can if they need to be.
When we come back, we're going to start diving into some of the matchups, and there's some ones that are going to be a little different because of the injury front for these two teams. We'll be diving into that coming up on this massive Thursday night game here. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season. Whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both, there's no better time to jump in the action. If you haven't tried it yet, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Prize Picks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats, fantasy scores, field goals attempted, free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. I'm Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast. He's Travis Rogers, host of Locked On Rams. We've got a massive game coming up tonight. Seahawks and Rams, first place in the NFC and NFC West up for grabs. Both these teams at 11-3. And again, I don't know that we're going to find a bigger Thursday night game that has ever happened, at least when Amazon has had these games. This is certainly the biggest one that they've had this time of year, with 2 11-win teams duking it out. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Rams with no interruptions, member-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to LockedOnSeahawks.supercast.com or LockedOnRams.supercast.com and check out the link in the show notes to learn more. All right, Travis, let's dive into some of the matchups to watch in this game. And I know it's only been 5 weeks since these two teams got together, but as we've kind of hit on already, there are a few injuries for these teams, and there's been a few injuries these teams have been dealing with since that game. Seattle's actually on the opposite end of the spectrum here in the sense that they've welcomed back Julian Love. Their starting center, Jalen Sundell, returned on Sunday against the Colts. And it seems like they are in that rare spot where they are getting much healthier here going down to the stretch run. The Rams, not so much, and they're certainly dealing with the injuries that they've had at tackle. They're dealing with Davante Adams injury. So there might be some different ingredients than what we saw in that first matchup in terms of and matchups, positional battles that we need to watch in this one.
Yeah, as far as the Rams injuries go, we talked a little bit about Davante. That's the big one. That's the one that I think is going to be talked about the most. Puka Nacua left the game a couple of times last week against the Lions too. Both times, cramping, but he left the game. Puka Nacua is about as tough as a guy that it gets. So for him to leave the game is always kind of interesting. We'll see whether or not he's able to battle through that this week coming up. So they're going to need him more than ever. If he was cramping with Davante Adams out there, we'll see what it looks like when he's going to get an even larger workload, presumably, because Adams isn't out there. They've been okay with Rob Havenstein been out. Warren McClendon kind of coming in at right tackle has held it down pretty well. Obviously, Seattle is a different animal when it comes to the assignment that he's going to be asked to pick up. The big one from the first matchup to right now, as far as the Rams' health goes, Quentin Lake. Like Quentin Lake was having the best year of his season, of his career earlier. He was kind of on a Pro Bowl sort of trajectory. He got a dislocated elbow, and maybe they'll get him back before the playoffs start, but he's certainly not going to be available on Thursday night. So they're going to miss him on the back end, which is, I think, the most important matchup of all, because JSN being who he is and being able to do what he does, clearly the weakest part of this Rams roster. We know what they can do offensively. We know that they can rush the passer the way they do with guys like Jared Verse and Byron Young. Their secondary is suspect. Their corners in particular are suspect. And, Emmanuel Forbes has been taken advantage of several times this season. He's kind of either having a really good day or a really bad day. We'll see how he does. And then on the other side, Darius Williams has been up and down. Akilla Witherspoon hasn't really been reinserted back into the lineup in the way that he was prior to his injury. They brought back Darian Kendrick, so he's back in the mix. Kobe Durant's been kind of all over the map as well. So, this kind of comes back to where we started with Darnold. If Darnold is able to get a little time and be the best version of himself, there's opportunities in the back end of the Rams defense. It's dependent on that pass rush to get home and make him uncomfortable so they can't exploit what's the soft spot in the back.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned with Quentin Lake, because after he came out is when it seemed like Seattle's offense started to figure some things out. Yep. And I'm not going to compare him to Nick Eamon-Wari, because Nick Eamon-Wari, I think, is already becoming one of those one-of-one type players in the NFL. But he is one of those guys that you can move all over the place. They can play a lot of different positions, and that gives your defense the ability to dictate things a little bit. And when you don't have a player like that available, you suddenly have to make a lot more subs. It limits your flexibility. So I think Seattle's going to be looking at it from that perspective, like, hey, we don't have that guy that's that Swiss Army knife back there that we have to worry about trying to figure out where he's at. And it has a ripple effect on what everybody else does. So I think this before the first matchup. This is definitely a game that I think the Seahawks have the ability to get the ball downfield. It's just going to be about allowing Sam Darnold to have the time to do it and making sure that Sam himself trusts what he's seeing. Because, again, most of the games this year have been really good about that. That Rams game, he made some horrible decisions with the football. He just got to know where Cameron Kinchens is, because Cameron Kinchens turns into Superman against the Seattle Seahawks. For whatever reason, it's the opposite of Sam Darnold. He had 2 picks against Geno in a game last year, 2 picks in that first matchup this season. So Sam's got to be watching him. You mentioned McClendon. Going back and watching the film, he has exceeded my expectations in pass protection. I mean, the run blocking, I'm not surprised, because that's what he was great at Georgia. I am curious, though. He has not faced an edge group like the one Seattle's going to be throwing at him. That's got a variety of different horses, so to speak, that can run races. DeMarcus Lawrence with his physicality, his speed to power. Uchenna Nwosu with his quickness, his speed to power. Derek Hall, he's just really a power guy that has a relentless motor. Boye Mafe is more of the twitchy guy. I mean, they have all kinds of guys. And I'll throw Nick Eamon-Wari in there too. Eamon-Wari has had plays where they're playing him like a defensive end. Like, how many safeties can you do that with in the National Football League? And he's good at it. Like, he can rush, he can blitz. This is going to be a matchup that McClendon is going to be tested. And I'll even say Alaric Jackson, who's had an ankle that he's been battling for a good chunk of the season. Like, those guys are going to be tested, and that's not even mentioning Byron Murphy's playing Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber football right now. Leonard Williams should be a first-team all-pro this year. He should have been last year, and he didn't get either team. You got to deal with that. To me, from a Rams offensive perspective, that is what dictates what happens in this game. Are you going to give Matt Stafford enough time? Are you going to be able to run the ball the way you did in the first half? I know Seattle was ticked about that. And then they came out and shut down Kyren Williams in the second half in that first matchup. And a lot of it had to do with that D-line. Like, no, you're not doing this to us anymore. I am fascinated to watch that tonight.
Yeah, it should be really interesting because the Rams had, like you said, when Matthew Stafford has this much time, he's going to do a lot of damage. He's having the best career, but the best season he's had in Los Angeles, maybe the best season that he's had in his career, and he's had a pretty darn good career. But when you get him pressure, like every other quarterback that plays in this league, he turns into a slightly different guy. And especially if that pressure can come in the middle. And I think that's probably where it is more likely. Typically when the Rams struggle, it's rarely from the edge. It's usually from the middle, and it's usually from the left side of the middle. Steve Avila did not have his best game against the Lions a week ago. So we'll see whether or not that's something that can be exploited. Now, I do think that the Rams have some optionality, right? You mentioned Kyren Williams. They kind of shut him down. Well, they got Williams, and Blake Corum is a different player now than he was 2 weeks ago. He has been really, really good. The Rams have really leaned heavily on that 3 tight end package. The one team that they really didn't use it much against was Seattle a few weeks ago. So I'm curious, especially with the absence of Davante Adams, if they go back to more of that 13 personnel that they've had a great deal of success with. I know somebody that you and your Seahawks people are familiar with, Colby Parkinson, has really been unlocked the last couple of weeks. He's getting in the end zone. He's playing really, really good football, really physical football, a couple of touchdowns last week. So maybe they try to figure out a way to use that more often, but they've got some tricks up their sleeve. Sean McVay, when you get into these short week, weird week, gotta have it, big games, he's almost always got a little something, and the more chaotic it gets, it seems the better he is. So I'm excited to see what he brings out.
And Mike McDonald has been that way on defense too. Like, I talked to Julian Love about this earlier this week. Like, I don't know that there'd be a matchup that fits this better than these two coaches in terms of guys that seem to be a step ahead of the other, and putting them against each other, especially in 3 days, the chaos, right. and that seems to be where these two guys just absolutely thrive. And Mike McDonald, like Seattle, I mentioned Nick Eamon-Warrior. I'm going to keep bringing him up. Like, that is such a weapon to have against a team that is trying to do 13 personnel. Like, it's like, again, Seattle doesn't have to sub a bunch of dudes out. They can say, okay, Nick, you're playing linebacker now, or you're playing end. Like, they can move him all over the place, and he can be dominant in any of those positions. And they have a couple other guys that they feel like they can do that with. One other matchup that I want to keep an eye on in this football game real quick, I talked about this on our Tuesday show, but Seattle, and you hear the whole establish the run idea. I think you need to establish the pass-catching running back, because that was really what got Seattle's offense going. And I know that Landman's had a really solid season in the middle, but if he's one-on-one with Ken Walker III, I am taking that matchup every single time. And Walker had 44 receiving yards in that game. I am expecting that Clint Kubiak is going to be having that in his pocket to get his running backs the football. Charbonnet is also a good pass catcher, and that is something that I think could open things up for some of those big plays downfield, especially without Quentin Lake playing in this football game.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. Landman was off to an incredible start. He's basically, leading the team in tackles. He's got the punch out thing going, but it's been a little quieter over the last couple of weeks, and he's played well, but it wasn't quite at that level that he was at and through the first, call it maybe 2/3 of the season. This has been a little bit different. So I think you're right. I think there may be some opportunities there for Seattle.
When we come back, we are going to dive into some keys to victory, and we're going to look at the spread, where things stand heading into tonight's game at Lumen Field. Don't go away. You're listening to Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. Welcome back. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. I'm Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks. He's Travis Rogers from Locked On Rams. And the biggest game in Thursday night football history, I'm just going to say it because the records, that's exactly what it is that we're going to be watching tonight. The Seahawks looking to get even with the Rams after that 2-point loss in SoFi Stadium 5 weeks ago. Travis, these two teams, it's fascinating because Seattle's won 4 straight, but the way they're doing it is much different than what they did in the first 9 or 10 games. Not that Seattle's defense has been bad at any point this season. I mean, other than the Bucs game, which they were down to like 8 string safeties in that game. That was part of the problem. But Seattle's defense has been really good all year, but they've taken it to another level the last 4 games. The offense has taken some big steps back, but they find ways to make plays when they need to. The special teams has stayed great. So it's kind of a different setup with what these teams are doing. Seattle's defense has just been absolutely ridiculous the last month. And even that game against the Rams holding Matthew Stafford down the way they did. I mean, they got put in bad spots a couple times that led to touchdowns. And otherwise, they really held Matthew Stafford and company in check the way nobody else has done this year. They're going to be trying to do that again in front of the 12s at Lumen Field. As far as the keys to victory, what the Rams have to do, and maybe you can look at some things from that first matchup as guidance for this, but you're on the road, really good chance there's going to be rain and wind for this game. The weather has been just flat out nasty up here in the Pacific Northwest as of late. This time of year, that's what you can expect in Seattle. But what are you looking at as the keys for the Rams to get the job done and get the season sweep and really propel themselves to have a great chance to win the NFC West?
Yeah, I'll go back to where we started, Corbin, and it makes Sam Darnold look like Sam Darnold has looked against the Rams the last 3 times they played him. They're going to score points, right? Now, whether they score 20 or 24 or 40 or 44, they're going to score. I mean, they've had over 40 points 3 times. They've had over 35 6 times. They've had over 37. They score points. Now, they didn't score a ton against Seattle, but I think that they're going, especially the way that they've been playing of late, the offense is really clicking. The one game they lost in Carolina was because they turned it over, but they still scored a ton of points. I think this will come down to whether or not Sam Darnold can be the version that you've described, which is an effective, positive, productive force, or the guy that the Rams have seen 3 times in a row that has literally sunk his team 3 times in a row against this defense, against seeing Jared Verse and Byron Young and Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner and all those guys. If they can make Darnold do this, right, which they've done 3 times in a row, the big eyes and the seeing ghosts and all that stuff, I think the Rams are going to win this game. If he can sit back there and take his time and be the good version of Sam Darnold, a lot of people at LA know what that looks like, seeing him at SC and everything else. I think the Rams are going to have their hands full, but make Sam Darnold the bad version of himself, and I think things go LA's way.
And I think on the flip side for the Seahawks, you got to make the Rams defend all your playmakers in this game. And I felt like there was too much. And look, if I was playing quarterback, I'd be trying to throw the ball to Jackson Smith-Njigba as much as I could too. But it seemed like in the first 2.5 quarters or so of that game that there was a lot of force feeding to number 11. And once they started getting the ball to the tight ends and the running backs and Rashid Shaheed, they were this close. I mean, Emmanuel Forbes made a really good play, but Darnold also slightly underthrew that ball. I think if that play happens in the game tonight, I think you're looking at a touchdown because those two have started to click the last 2 games. Shaheed's had an average of 71 receiving yards a game these last 2 games. He's starting to figure it out with Darnold. Those two are building chemistry. So now they've got that secondary weapon. Cooper Kupp's coming off of a couple decent games as well. He's going to want to play well against his former team. I think it's those secondary targets. And I think if Sam Darnold can play within himself and distribute the ball a little bit more, the opportunities are going to be there for JSN. He is going to get open. The opportunities are going to be there to get him the football. But I think in this game in particular, especially without Quentin Lake out there, I am testing that secondary with all of my weapons. I'm spreading the ball around, and I'm getting Sam Darnold's pocket moved as much as I can. I'm trying to set up those bootlegs. I'm trying to get positions where I'm getting waggle plays, whatever, to try to get him. And sometimes if he gets running, that opens everything up for him. He kind of has some Russell Wilson to him in that, and he seems to get into the game a little bit more when he's used his legs a little bit. So those are things I'm looking for the Seahawks to do offensively. But I think the distribution aspect, and even those Vikings games, seemed like he got a little too Justin Jefferson involved. I think if he is able to distribute the football and really use all the guys that Seattle's got there, the chance of them winning this game goes up exponentially because of the opponent. I just think it is crucial. They got to do that in this one.
Yeah, I think we're both looking at the same thing, right? I think that it comes down, if he's good, I think it tips your way. If he's not, I think it tips the other way. And then, of course, the great equalizer is, just turnovers on either side. Now, the one thing that's a little different for the Rams now than when they played last time is they can kick field goals, or at least they can attempt to kick field goals. They, when they had Josh Carty going through whatever it was he was going through, and they went from week 6 till week 11 without even trying to kick a field goal. They didn't even line up to try one. They just basically said, forget it. We're not going to do it. Harrison Mevis, they went out and they got him. He's come in. He's kind of calmed that entire thing down. He's made all his PATs. He's made all of his field goal attempts that they've tried now. They haven't asked him to kick one under a ton of pressure yet. And like you mentioned, bad weather, wind, rain, all of that stuff. Those are great equalizers when it comes to these things. But they do have one other special teams weapon in their pocket that they did not have the first time they played each other.
Well, Seattle may feel they have the advantage regardless in that, but Jason Myers, hopefully his leg is okay after kicking 6 field goals on Sunday against the Colts. But, I think when you look at the keys defensively for Seattle going into this game, and you want to put the Rams in a position where they are kicking field goals, I think the red zone efficiency is going to be vital. But I think they've got to find a way to get 1 or 2 sacks. That might not seem like much, but against Matthew Stafford, that's quite a few. And they've done a really good job of protecting him getting the ball out quickly this year. Seattle has got to find a way where that front, or maybe it's somebody like Eamon Worry or Devin Witherspoon, those 2 guys are playing out of their minds right now, and they are as good of blitzing defensive backs as you're going to find in the NFL. Maybe this is a game that Mike McDonald dips a little bit more into his bag of blitzes and his sim pressures. They haven't had to do it this year because their front line has been so good, and maybe they're able to do that again tonight. But I would not be surprised if we see Mike McDonald. He's not going to bust everything out because it's not a playoff game. But I would not be surprised if he's doing what Sean McVay is doing on offense with some of the intricacies, pulling out some bag of tricks and saying, okay, Matthew Stafford, have you seen this from us? And send some guys after him and hope that you can get a few sacks, maybe get a turnover, because as you said, the Rams have had a few games recently where they have coughed the football up, and the Seahawks have been doing a really good job of turning teams over the last 4 weeks. Does that continue? If it does, I love Seattle's chances of winning this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an incredible game. There's, like we talked about at the beginning, there's a ton on the line, not just for the division, but for the number 1 overall seed, for avoiding going on the road to cold weather places, which the Rams would really rather not do. I don't think that the Seahawks want to go to Philadelphia or Chicago or Green Bay or any of those places either. So, this is an incredibly important game. And of course, San Francisco's just sitting back saying, yeah, go ahead. We're still very much in the mix too. So even though we're towards the end of the line, there's still a lot left to do.
Yeah, it's funny. The Seahawks were just hoping that Grandpa Phillip Rivers was not going to beat them on Sunday. Right. And there's certainly both the Rams and Seahawks are going to be cheering for Phillip Rivers this next weekend going against the 49ers. Can you find the fountain of youth one more time and give us a little separation from the 49ers with a couple of weeks left to play? But before that, one of these teams is going to get a big win on Thursday Night Football and have a real good shot at winning the NFC West. The Rams in particular, if the Rams get it done, they only have a game against the Cardinals at the end of the season. Seattle's got to play San Francisco on the road in Week 18. So even if Seattle wins this game, that doesn't mean they're winning the West. There's still a lot of dominoes that could fall here, but this is still a massive game, and I'm going to keep saying it, the biggest Thursday night game that's probably ever been played. 2 11-win squads, prime time, middle of the week. This is what the NFL was always hoping for when they had the schedule come out that way. He's Travis Rogers. You can follow him at Travis Rogers on X. I'm Corbin Smith. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to listen in to Locked On Seahawks and Locked On Rams. We'll have our post-game episodes coming up on Friday. Different schedule for the podcasters out there as well when we have these short weeks. But make sure to listen in. We'll have a Locked On Seahawks post-game show coming your way as well, a couple hours after the game. It'll be a little late, but if you love your Seahawks, make sure you're listening to it. See if we're talking about a win or another close loss to the Rams. Make sure to listen in, and thanks for tuning into this Crossover Thursday. Go Hawks, go Rams.